Well, in a few weeks, Sherry and my mother and I are going to fly to Montana. And I wouldn't say I hate flying. That's probably too strong. But I certainly don't enjoy it. It's something for me, it's just, you kind of endure it, right? You're crammed in those little small seats next to strangers for hours. There's cancellations, there's delays. When I thought about it, I think what bothers me the most about flying, though, is I have to pare down my stuff. I have to figure out what can I get through security and fit in that overhead bin. And it irks me to spend $40 for a suitcase that may or may not be at baggage claim when I get to my destination. And so I'd rather drive, honestly. If I can, I'll just drive. Because when I'm driving, I can throw 5 pairs of shoes and a full-size bottle of shampoo and a machete in there if you want to. It doesn't matter. And I know where all my stuff is. It's always right there with me. So I'd rather drive. I like to have my stuff with me. And I don't pack light. I like being prepared. That's just how I am. Maybe you're that way too. So if you are like that, if you are like me, imagine taking a road trip like this. Turn your Bibles to Mark 6, starting in verse 7. So calling the 12 to him, Jesus began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over impure spirits. And these were his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra shirt. No money, no luggage, no change of clothes, no map, no motel reservations. I'm just kind of curious. Raise your hand if you think that sounds like an exciting adventure. That sounds like something you would want to do. Nobody? Okay, all right. Well, for the rest of us, that sounds kind of awful, doesn't it? I've never taken a trip like that. That does not sound exciting to me. And he specified no bread. I want you to, if you have sermon notes, next to that passage I just read, I want you to write no bread, because that's going to be a theme this morning. And so he goes on, so whenever you enter a house, verse 10, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, leave that place and shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. So what he's saying is when you first go to town, you meet someone who's willing to host you, to take you in, you stay with them, and you stay there the whole time. I think what he's trying to avoid is, don't trade up. If you get a better offer for a better house or better food, Jesus doesn't want any perception that his apostles are in this for money or status or for perks. And so they went out and preached that people should repent. And they drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. I just want you to imagine how a trip like that would shape you. If you left with nothing but a stick in your hand, what would you be trusting for that whole time? How would that change your prayers, for instance? I can tell you, it would expand my prayer life way beyond the ruts of what I normally pray about, the same things I pray about. And we're not sure how long those guys were out. It doesn't say. Matthew says they were sent throughout the villages of Galilee, so it could be days, maybe a few weeks. But imagine the stories that they would have when they came back. And so when they finally come home, verse 30, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. And then because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." And so they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. So these guys, they desperately need some downtime, but the people watch as they leave, and they're leaving for a quiet, private retreat, right? And they see kind of where they're going, and these people apparently run on the shore, and they are there when they land. This exhausted band of disciples cannot get a break. And so when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And so he began teaching them many things. And by this time, it was late in the day. So his disciples came to him, This is a remote place, they said. It's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, that would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread just to give them something to eat? How many loaves do you have, he asked. Go and see. And when they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. John's gospel tells us that the 5 loaves and the 2 fish are actually some kid's sack lunch. That's all they could find. That's all they have. There's 2 things that Jesus says there that I don't want us to miss. He told them, you give them something to eat. And how many loaves do you have to feed these people with? Those are ridiculous statements, honestly. We'll learn that there are thousands and thousands of people there. And so to look at these young men with 1 sack lunch and say, you feed this mass of people, it's ridiculous. And then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. And so they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Well, now what? I mean, they've gone around and created an expectation among all these people that they're going to get something, right? But what? I mean, this feels foolish. But it would not feel foolish if they knew it was God holding their sack lunch. And so taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks. And he broke the loaves. And then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. And he also divided the 2 fish among them all. I don't know what's happening here. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know, is it like the entire creation process and the time it takes to raise wheat and process it into bread and then the whole life cycle of growing fish? Is he reproducing that instantaneously in his lap over and over? I don't know. Nobody knew what was happening, but they all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. And the number of men who had eaten was 5,000. That's just the men. There could be 10, 15,000 people out here. You know, I think we're so well fed as modern Americans that we can't appreciate, really, how extraordinary it would be for basketfuls of leftovers to be strewn on the ground. I mean, for thousands of people to be so full, so completely satisfied, they don't even bother to finish. They don't even bother to pick up what's left. That's a superabundance that they probably almost never experienced. In fact, for most of human history, hunger was a serious reality. I read a lot of history books, and how to find something to eat, that is a constant concern for most of human history, for most people. But apparently, you know, most of these people left home and brought no food with them. And they were out all day long. I think for me to kind of relate to what's normal for those folks, probably the closest I've come is when I was in Honduras a couple years ago. We were visiting several of the churches that my previous church supports. And one of those is up in Las Habanas, up in the mountains. And so we had paid some church members in advance to do a cookout for the church. And so, you know, we paid for the food. So we got up there, we did our thing. And the custom there is you feed the guests first. And it was kind of embarrassing, but they always fed us first. And so they gave me this plate of rice and beans and fried chicken, scrawny fried chicken, which is what we had all the time there. And I ate some of it, but I was done. And so my instinct, and what's normal for me, is you will find a trash can, right, and you throw it away. But one of the other Americans said, no, give it to him. And there was like this little, 3rd grade kid sitting next to his mom on a bench watching me. And it felt like an insulting gesture to me. It seemed gross to me. But I did it. I took my plate of food and I handed it to this little kid, and he ate my leftover food off my plate with the fork that I had been eating with. He ate it all. And that was normal for that kid. I mean, he ate whenever he could, whatever he could. And I imagine that would be normal for many of these peasants, these day laborers in the crowd that day with Jesus. These are not people with refrigerators full of food who throw away leftovers. So the whole scene, the green grass, there's a quiet lake, being well fed and content. Jesus there as a shepherd. Does that sound familiar? Tell me, does that recall anything? How about this? Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. All the elements in that psalm are seen by the lake that day. They're out in the country, there's the green grass, they're hungry, but they're with the good shepherd, so they lack nothing. And so the lesson should have been very clear. It should be clear who Jesus is and what he's capable of. But there's another lesson that Jesus is teaching that they were supposed to learn that day, and that's when he asked them those strange questions. What do you have to feed thousands of people? What can you give to them? The lesson was Jesus required his disciples to give first. And then he magnified their act of faith. And he could have done it differently, but he took what they gave. He asked them to give first. And then he did what only he could do. They had to give first. That's an important lesson. We're going to go back to that again. Let's pick up in Mark 6:45. So immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go out on ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. And after leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. And later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on the land. And he saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. And shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake. And he was about to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. And they cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. And immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it's I, don't be afraid." This may sound like Jesus was intending to walk past, maybe hoping to not be seen, but that doesn't make sense, especially when you see what he's trying to accomplish. I think it's better to understand he meant to pass by means so that they would see him pass by walking on the water. This is a deliberate revelation of his divine power. And then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. And they were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. They'd not understood about what? Well, that he was God among them. They'd not understood how differently they needed to start thinking and behaving as disciples of Jesus. They're still thinking like the world. What do we have? What can we do? Instead of, if God is with us, what becomes possible? So even after traveling all over Galilee with no money, no food, and being just fine, even after seeing 5,000 people fed by a sack lunch, they're still not getting it. So Jesus repeats the lesson a few chapters later. So flip over to Mark 8. During those days, another large crowd gathered. And since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I have compassion for these people. They've already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way because some of them have come a long distance." And his disciples answered, "But where in this remote place can we get enough bread to feed them?" "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked. 7, they replied. "How many loaves do you have?" Does that sound familiar? So Jesus sets up another teaching moment for his apostles. And it's all the same. It's huge crowd, remote location, they're hungry. Jesus has compassion for these people. "How many loaves do you have?" And so he told the crowd to sit down on the ground. And when he'd taken the 7 loaves and given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. And they did so. And they had a few small fishes as well. He gave thanks for them also, and he told the disciples to distribute them. And the people ate and were satisfied. And afterwards, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. And about 4,000 were present. So they didn't understand the lesson after the feeding of the 5,000. So Jesus walks on water, stills a storm to reinforce his authority, his power. And then he repeats the lesson with the feeding of the 4,000. And he asks them the same questions. He again requires them to give something first. And again, there's an abundance of leftovers. So surely by now they get it, right? So the Pharisees came, verse 11, and began to question Jesus. This is at the same place where they just fed 4,000 people with a few breadsticks. The Pharisees came and began to question Jesus to test him. They asked him for a sign from heaven. And he sighed deeply and he said, why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign is going to be given it. Now, all we've been hearing about, we've been reading the Gospel of Mark for weeks now. All we've been hearing about are constant public miracles done by Jesus. I mean, it almost seems like you follow him for 30 minutes and you're going to see diseased and dying people cured and demons fleeing and thousands of people fed from nothing. But the Pharisees demand, I guess, a better sign? Because I guess those sorts of miracles aren't good enough. And so they come and show us something spectacular in the sky. And then. But the truth is, nothing is going to convince them. They refuse to recognize that the God they have been reading about and talking about and worshiping in their synagogues is standing right there in front of them. When he heals in their synagogue on the Sabbath, they speculate that he's a demon. I mean, that is a hard heart. And that's what's on his mind when he leaves that place and gets back on the boat with his apostles. So then they left him and got back into the boat and crossed to the other side. And the disciples had forgotten to bring bread except for one loaf they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. Now in the Bible, yeast or leaven is often symbolic of influence. Just like a yeast works through a whole batch of dough, the influence of someone can work through a whole group. And so the yeast of the Pharisees it's their hard heart, it's their cynicism, it's how closed off they are to being changed by God. And so they discussed this with one another and said, it's because we have no bread. So we have no bread. Jesus is talking about yeast, so he's mad at us for not buying bread. That's the connection that they make. Okay, look back at everything we've covered in the lesson today. He sends them on a long journey with no bread. They go on a retreat with no bread, and he feeds 5,000 with a sack lunch. He stays out in the country for 3 days with no bread, and then feeds 4,000 with a few breadsticks. Do you think Jesus will be upset if his apostles forgot to bring bread on a short trip across the lake? Do you really think that's what he's worried about? And so I think what happens next is Jesus unloads on them. He is fed up with how dense they are choosing to be, how unwilling they are to trust. Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but you fail to see and ears but you fail to hear? Don't you remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? 12. And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? 7. He said to them, do you still not understand? And I think he said it like that. I think he was done. I think he was irked. But let me ask you, do you understand? Do we understand? You know, I've already admitted that I like to have my stuff with me. And I'll also confess, I like nice stuff. And if I have my stuff with me, that gives me security. I feel prepared. I feel self-sufficient. I like feeling like that. I don't like running out of things. I don't like depending on others. That perspective, I would call a perspective of scarcity. What I mean is, when stuff gets scarce, I feel anxious. Honestly, it feels like failure. It means I'm weak. It means I'm vulnerable. The perspective of scarcity says I better insulate myself with enough stuff and money and insurance so I don't experience that. But if you dig a little deeper, a perspective of scarcity says, I don't trust God to come through. I'm not just insulating myself from scarcity. I'm insulating myself from depending on God. I'm worried about having enough bread. I don't just want daily bread. I want today's bread and all of next week's bread. I just want to just know it's there. That's a perspective of scarcity. If that's my perspective, what am I putting my faith in? It's my stuff. It's my money. That's what I'm hoping in. In these chapters of Mark, Jesus has stripped his apostles of everything that normally gives them a sense of security, and he sends them out without their stuff, without bread, with no plans, into storms, yet they're always okay. Why? Because he was there. They kept seeing these miracles and asking, who is this? And the answer every time was, this is God. God is in our boat, and he never runs short. He is Lord over the natural world and the spiritual world. Nothing is impossible for him. He's recession-proof, and his timing is perfect, and his knowledge of what you need is perfect, and he and all of his goodness and power are right there with you no matter what is happening, even in a storm, even when you don't have your stuff, even when you're hungry. The God of miracles, the God of superabundance is right there with you. So what should that mean for us? Here's one answer from Hebrews 13. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So why are you talking about having no bread? Jesus was trying to transform his apostles and us away from the normal, the worldly perspective of scarcity, which makes us anxious, and it puts our hope into things that are always going to disappoint us. Faith in the Good Shepherd gives us instead a perspective of abundance. Now understand, church, this does not mean that we can be irresponsible or lazy or take on massive debt because Jesus will take care of us anyway. That's not what I'm saying at all. This is a very unique way of living. We should still be good stewards. We should still save. We should still plan. But we have God in the boat. So we can be assured that we have access to all that we need when we need it. Because we trust him, not our stuff. And this frees us to hold our stuff lightly. It frees us to be generous, to give generously with joy, to believe the best in others, give them the benefit of the doubt. Even if they do us wrong, God's not going to. We can do those things because we operate out of abundance, because we are with the Good Shepherd. And we will not want, we will not lack. And yes, at times, he's going to send us out with very little. At times, he's going to push us to the edge where we're forced to renew our trust in him. But through those trials, he's strengthening us. He's maturing us. He's giving us clarity. He's expanding our prayers. Or maybe he's just making us wait so when he does deliver, it's going to be even sweeter. It's going to be even more spectacular. And here's the other lesson, remember, that Jesus was teaching in those stories, and that is we must give first towards what we want God to grow. So Jesus asked his apostles how many loaves they had, and then he did amazing things with that. That's part of the perspective of abundance that he's cultivating in us. We give first, trusting that he'll provide the rest out of his abundance. So here's what that means for Oakdale, I think. If we want a healthy, growing church, we'll have to give first towards that, right? If you want a vibrant children's ministry here for your kids or your grandkids, you'll have to first invest some of your time in it. And I promise you, God will bless you for that. You'll see results. Your family will be blessed if you'll step out first, if you'll invest some time first in what is happening with the kids here. And if you want a small group to go to, or you have a circle of friends where you feel supported, where you want to be with them, you're going to have to contribute first towards that. And it may mean that you are the one who first has to host. It may be that you're the one who first has to invest some time into prepping a lesson or a meal. And finally, as we know, we are really constrained here by a lack of classroom space and parking. And the only reason all this growth is happening is because God is in this. God is blessing Oakdale. I tell you, God is in our boat. He's in the boat with us here. And he's going to provide the space that we need for the next generation at Oakdale. I know he will. But what I learned from these stories in Mark is that we're going to have to give first. We're going to give first towards that. And so at some point, we're going to be coming to you with a capital campaign. And whenever that day comes, I'm asking you to remember the promises that we heard today from Jesus. I'm asking you to see the future of this church through eyes of abundance. And I'm asking you to give joyfully because God's in the boat with us. The Good Shepherd is with us. And you'll lack nothing. It is an exciting time to be in this church. That's your lesson. Let's stand and sing.